Right. You will notice that for my presentation, actually, I compare January to August, January to May versus January to April. Why is that? Because May, I think, if you're following the market very closely, you will notice that May actually is more or less a kind of a turning point for the Chinese steel market. Until April, everything is just purely market economy, demand and supply. Around May the 12th, the Chinese government stepped in, talking about the too high bulk commodity prices, and that's when you see the price. You saw the prices in China, whether it's steel or the iron ore or the coking coal or the scrap, experience a bit of turbulence, especially about steel. Whereas for the raw material prices, you will notice that they are rather resilient to some extent in comparison with the steel prices. What I want to highlight is that first of all, I'll give you overall the macroeconomic performance. If you're looking at the 2021, the first 4 months versus the first 5 months, you'll notice that year-on-year comparison, the year-on-year growth is still very impressive, but there are some changes. By May, you'll notice that a lot of year-on-year comparison was not really as substantial as the first 4 months. Part of the reason is because do remember the low base numbers in China apply for until April or March last year. So that's why when you do the year-on-year comparison, because of the low base last year. Another thing, of course, in May, something has changed in China's macroeconomic environment, more to do with about commodity prices. So look at the property market, you'll notice that the land lease actually is a market sentiment teller of the developers, whether they are more enthusiastic in developing new projects or they are more cautious. So look at the year-on-year comparison, is already a decline, unlike the first 4 months. So that is something of the changes in the property market I want to draw everyone's attention.
Now, what are the enablers? Why India suddenly become a net exporter, or why? What are the dynamics which are playing into? When this government came into action, they launched a scheme which is called Make in India. They are promoting manufacturing within India. The second scheme which has launched and which has got significant impact or influence upon the iron ore and steel industry is called Atmanirbhar. Atmanirbhar means self-reliance. Government is saying that you manufacture everything within India and try to bring the raw material which are related also into the India. Now, what government is doing? Now, there are various initiatives which government has undertaken for doing this. There is smart city concept which government is working upon. There are smart cities which are coming up. Government is also building dedicated freight corridors from north to south, from east to west, and from north to east region. That will give significant leeway and reduce the freight cost associated with bulk material carrier like fertilizers or grains or iron ore. Vehicle scrappage policy has been, the topic was hotly discussed for last so many years. Now government has come out with a amendment or act which says that all commercial vehicles which are more than 15 years old, they need to be compulsorily scrapped. So there will be a lot of steel which will be available in coming down, subsequent years. FDI in steel sector is also growing. So India is in short, I want to say it's a happening place for steel industry and mining industry.
So various projects, a lot of projects underway. ArcelorMittal, I've got a number of projects in Germany, France, and Spain. First Alpine is looking at green hydrogen production and the use of hydrogen in the processes. Same going on in several plants in Germany and Holland. SSAB are in partners in that well-publicized hybrid project, and they've already started to produce on pilot scale HBI produced from green sources. And there are several other green steel and green iron projects within Scandinavia. It should be said that Sweden, Swedish government and the EU and investors, the financial community within Scandinavia and Sweden in particular, are requiring that much of industry heads towards and has clear plans for a reduced carbon activities. So this is being driven very hard by a lot of the financial community as well as the technical guys. So we're looking now to committing to sustainable and green mining as possible. We tick many of the boxes. We're looking to electrify and digitize as much of the mine as we can, and future-proof it so that any new automated technologies can be inserted pretty much straight away. And we're designing this to have the lowest impact. We have agreements already in place with green energy supply, and that's really our long-term goal is to build a sustainable mining business as green as possible, and that fits in the newly developing, if you like, circular economies for the steel industry.
But first of all, I'd like to go to Rani, and having worked for some of the major producers, the big end of town, I suppose, from the production side, when we talk geography and companies really, and just get her take on what she thinks about supply is going to look like at the moment, and particularly as the big ones like particularly Rio, BHP, Vale, and FMG are going to look from a supply side, and what kind of concerns there may be for their supply. If I can pass to you, Rani, just to get a bit of a broader picture on the supply side.
Look, I think the supply market is kind of reflecting the volatility of the market tension. So firstly, you've got a geopolitical environment that is fairly unstable. Looking at the big miners, FMG, Rio, and BHP, a large component of their supply relationship is actually in China. So with the bilateral tensions that is in place, the miners will suffer. There are diversification strategy, and many of the organizations have done that. The diversification strategy may not be sustainable, right? So here you have organizations, private enterprises that are struggling, and then you've got political tensions at a government level. So at some point, there needs to be a strategy that encompasses, some form of supply continuity. You can't have a political tension dictate the supply market, which is what's happening right now. Andrew, just to talk a little bit about China, this is a market that's worth 250 billion, two-way between China and Australia, right? China accounts for more than 1/3 of Australia's export. So you can imagine, right, from just the supply and demand side of it is a relationship that is really critical to both parties. So in essence, organizations and governments do have to come back and develop a strategy that relates to supply continuity.
The tension between Australia and China is existing. But so far, if you're looking at the bulk commodities, actually coal has been caught in between, but not so much iron ore. I think the reason is that, of course, the tension is there, but at the same time, both governments realize how important iron ore to both. So reliance on the others to some extent is a double-edged sword to both parties. China is realizing it very clearly. And also very interesting, Andrew, you mentioned about Simandou. Simandou project definitely has a huge potential. But looking at the infrastructure, looking at the resources are really giant. But at the same time, you're lacking the infrastructure. Even China is really super speed developing a new project. I would say it would take about 3 to 5 years. So immediately you are facing the difficulty that if you got to cut off the supply from Australia, then your steel mills will not survive.